Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly kind of hidden philosophy that's actively shaping our physical and digital future. We're going to explore the deep historical roots of Silicon Valley's absolute obsession with immortality. We'll trace it all the way back to a profound philosophical divide, and then look at how those exact ideas culminate in the massive, almost unbelievable contradictions of one of tech's most powerful figures, Peter Thiel. So, let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the tech billionaires who are trying to live forever today, we actually have to go back to a surprisingly bitter sibling rivalry from the early 20th century. We're talking about two brothers who were born into the British intellectual aristocracy. I mean, a literal dynasty of scientific titans. They share the exact same elite education, the same raw exposure to the exploding power of science, but when they looked at the future of the human race, they saw two completely divergent timelines.
On one side, we've got the elder brother, Julian Huxley, a pioneering evolutionary biologist. He looked at the human condition, the bodies that age, the suffering, the inevitability of death, and he decided it was just a biological flaw. To Julian, humanity's moral imperative was to seize control of our biology and just engineer away death and suffering entirely. But then on the other side is his younger brother, the famous author Aldous Huxley. Aldous looked at that exact same dream and saw a massive trap. He realized that human beings are so terrified of suffering that we'd actually happily surrender our freedom, our art, and our messy human emotions to an authoritarian system, as long as it promised to eradicate our pain. He warned that the cage of the future wouldn't be built with iron bars. It'd be built with test tubes and genetic engineering. And the crazy part, we would actively love our servitude.
Now, it was actually Julian Huxley who gave a name to this technological vision. Back in 1957, he officially coined the term transhumanism. He defined it as the belief that our current biological state is merely a transitional phase. Driven by the recent discoveries in evolutionary biology, Julian believed that instead of waiting around for nature's blind watchmaker, we must actively direct and accelerate our own evolution using science.
And this ideology definitely didn't happen in a vacuum. Let's trace how this built up over time. It starts in 1858 when Darwin published his theory of evolution, establishing that humans are, at base, biological organisms. Fast forward to 1923, and scientists like J.B.S. Haldane were already proposing artificial birth in test tubes. Then, in 1946, Julian Huxley actually becomes the first Director General of UNESCO, drafting a manifesto that heavily pushed this idea of evolutionary humanism. And today, in the 21st century, these ideas aren't just sci-fi anymore. They're the governing ideology driving the massive investments and ambitions of Silicon Valley's most powerful elites.
Which brings us to Section 1, the inevitable ideology and its secular axioms. Transhumanism hasn't just survived, it's silently become the unnamed, dominant religion of the 21st century tech world. But you might be wondering, why is it so appealing?
Well, it really comes down to a set of core secular axioms that totally dominate modern capitalist and technocratic thought. As our sources point out, if you genuinely believe that the material universe is all there is, that there's no eternal soul or grand divine plan, and that biological death is the absolute, terrifying end of your existence, well, then transhumanism isn't crazy at all, is it? It's actually totally inevitable. If your body is just a decaying meat sack, then actively pursuing technologies to digitize your brain or engineer physical immortality is, frankly, the only rational reaction to the horror of existence.
And that perfectly sets the stage for our next chapter. Section 2. Enter Peter Thiel, the ultimate contradiction. Thiel is a billionaire venture capitalist, co-founder of PayPal, early investor in Facebook, you know the resume. He's really the ultimate culmination of the transhumanist project, but with a highly contrarian, heterodox Christian twist that makes his worldview entirely unique.
Now, what's really interesting about this quote here is that Thiel completely rejects the standard acceptance of mortality. You know how Steve Jobs famously said that death is the single best invention of life because it gives life meaning and urgency? Yeah, well, Thiel believes the exact opposite. He explicitly frames his pursuit of radical life extension and immortality not just as some cool scientific goal, but as a moral crusade against death, which he views as the ultimate evil.
But this begs a pretty massive question. Does this pursuit of immortality break his own religious framework? This leads us to a fascinating theological and philosophical tension. Thiel claims to be an Orthodox Christian, right? Yet, by pouring massive resources into trying to engineer physical immortality in the flesh, essentially trying to build a counterfeit technological heaven right here on Earth, many theologians argue he's directly contradicting Orthodox Christian eschatology, which, relies on divine grace and resurrection, not biotech.
To understand just how deep this contradiction actually goes,
we have to look at eschatology, which is the theological study of the end of the world. Now, acting as impartial observers looking at Thiel's framework, it's clear he is deeply fascinated by, and frankly fearful of, the Antichrist. In his worldview, the Antichrist isn't some cartoon monster. It's a figure who promises peace and safety as an excuse to establish a global, totalitarian, one-world government. Thiel genuinely fears a future where a centralized state uses technology to suppress all individual liberty and monitor literally everyone.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates the immense, almost staggering irony of Peter Thiel's actions. On the left, we have Thiel's stated fear, a totalitarian state that uses mass surveillance to monitor every keystroke and suppress dissent. But on the right, we have Palantir, the multi-billion-dollar data analytics company Thiel actually created. I mean, think about it. Palantir literally builds the global surveillance architecture that intelligence agencies use to track citizens, predict behavior, and consolidate massive amounts of data.
And the irony doesn't even stop there. He named the company after the Palantiri from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. If you know the mythology, these are powerful seeing stones that let you witness events across vast distances. But they come with a massive warning label. They are incredibly dangerous and easily corrupted by dark, centralized forces. Naming a global surveillance apparatus after a fictional artifact known to inevitably serve a corrupting force, that is an incredibly revealing choice.
So the crucial point is really this. Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He identifies as a libertarian and an orthodox Christian who fears a totalitarian antichrist system, yet he actively funds the transhumanist pursuit of a counterfeit earthly immortality, and he quite literally built the central nervous system that any global surveillance state would absolutely require to subjugate a population. He fears the machine while simultaneously building its most powerful tools.
This overwhelming drive to conquer nature brings us full circle, back to Section 3, Aldous Huxley's final answer and a different path. While Julian Huxley pushed for a transhumanist utopia and Thiel embodies its modern contradictions today, Aldous Huxley spent his entire life trying to find an alternative answer to this technological nightmare.
Back in 1932, Aldous wrote Brave New World, his biting satire of his brother's ideas, showing a dystopia where humanity completely escapes suffering through genetic engineering and a state-mandated drug called soma. But 30 years later, in his final novel Island, Aldous proposed a totally different path. Instead of escaping pain through tech, the utopia of Island is built on embracing the messy human experience. It's a society organized around paying close, deliberate attention to suffering rather than constantly trying to engineer a quick way out of it.
And Aldous literally practiced what he preached right up to the very end. In 1963, as he was dying a slow and incredibly painful death from throat cancer, he made a final request to his wife. He asked her to inject him with 100 micrograms of LSD. But importantly, this wasn't an attempt to numb his pain or run away from reality. Actually, scratch that. It was the exact opposite. He used it to dissolve his ego and sharpen his conscious attention to the exact reality of his own death. He flat out refused to hide.
So this leaves us standing at a profound crossroads, looking at the exact same choice the Huxley brothers faced a century ago. As technology rapidly accelerates, offering us surveillance stones and the promise of living forever, we have a major decision to make. Will we surrender to the inevitable ideology of the transhuman machine, desperately trying to escape our mortality and our pain? Or will we find the courage to pay attention, to accept our limits, and fully embrace what it actually means to be human? Think deeply about the architects building our future and which path they're leading us down. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the systems being built around you, and I'll catch you next time.